Hello, I wanted to talk about the difference between the at sign, the equal sign, and the and sign in directives in Angular 1. Uh, I'm going to start with what they mean and then give you guys an example. So pretty much the at sign is an attribute string, the equal sign is a two-way model binding, and the and sign is a callback, pretty much for functions, callback method binding. So if you guys can remember lines 6 to 8, then you guys should be fine for the example. So 6, the at sign is for strings, the equal sign is for model, and sign is for pretty much functions. So here I have my controller, and my controller, I'm calling it a school search controller. And in school controller, I have my variables. So I'm going to start with my controller as this. Some of you guys will have scope, some of you guys will have this. For this example, I don't think it would matter too much. But the controller has a variable called name, and we call it math, which is, we're going to, as for this example, is going to be our string. This science data is also a string, but we're going to be working, it's going to be working as data. And grade, which is this grade, which is also this grade, is a function. So technically this grade is 90, since right here in line 23 we're returning 90. So after this controller, I'm going to show you guys the view of the controller. So the view of the controller, we have a section, we have H2 of my controller, we have an input box, we have an HR, and test display, which is pretty much my directive. So here, my controller, as you guys can see in H2, and my input box, which is the input box. This input box holds the ng model, and I told you guys that my model was this controller.data. So that's what I'm doing here, controller.data. So whenever I type something here, that controller.data receives the information. And HR to separate from my directive, because I want to show you guys a couple things. And then this is where my directive is going to be. So how do we display and put this information to my directive? So technically, to call our directive, we say test display. Actually, there's different ways to do it, but this is the way I usually do it. Test display. This is the way you call a directive. Call directive. But what if I want to pass these parameters? What if I want to pass a string, or what if I want to pass a model, or what if I want to pass a function to my directive from my controller? Well, here, to call a string, you would use this method. You would actually use the curly braces and the name of the string. If you want to call a model, you would do it this way. You won't use the curly braces. You would only do control.data for the name of your model. If you want to call a function, then obviously without the brackets as well, you'll do control.grade and your parentheses, because you'll be calling your grade function. So this is to send the at well, in the directive you'll call it by the at sign. In the directive you'll call this by the equal sign, because it is a data model, or we want it to pass it as a data model, and the directive will receive it as a data model because we put the equal sign. And this is the function, and the function will be received by the at sign, which I will show you. So in my directive, as you can see, it's called test display, and as you can see, we have here test display. So in my scope, I have my name, which is this name, and whatever we're passing, which is our name, we're saying this is a string. This model, we're passing control data. Even though it's a string, we're telling it here that is actually the model. And on function, we're passing in this control.grade. Not until it gets here does it know that is passing the function. So once we call our directive and we put it here, then I can make a controller. On line 16, I have a controller, I'm calling a controller, controller ask, I'm calling a card. I'm returning my directive, and here I'm calling my function controller 24, which is receiving it from 16. And 27 to 30 pretty much is what I'm going to display in the front end. So this is all I have in my HTML. So display.html. Obviously I'm calling it right here. So this directive knows which HTML to call. So I'm going to uncomment this. And before we get to the HTML, this is H2, which is my directive. This label is going to label my card, my name, which here my card.name is scope.name. So scope.name is this name up here. This name is getting reference from scope. So here, if I want to put it in card.name, card is this, then all I have to do is scope.name grabs this name right here, whatever I pass through it, and puts it here in card.myname. So name, when we passed it here, was control.name, which is math. So my label should be math. Then my model is just model. It's just what this is, because this is just your model. So this model is going to go here, and I'm going to also display it here. And my function, I'm going to rename it grade. So here, control grade, I'm passing it, and the variable is called func. Func knows that it's a function, and obviously since it's in the scope, I do scope.func, and I made this variable called grade. So when I go in my directive HTML, I just say card.grade, and it runs that function, so it should be 90. So let me run this, and as you guys can see, I have my directive, math, because of card.myname, 90 because of my card grade, and my model, which was science, as you guys can see here. So from all the way in my controller, I have science, goes right here, science, goes right here in my model, and goes right here to my test display. But so pretty much you guys understand the @sign passes strings, the and sign passes functions, but this data modeling, I haven't showed you guys much what it does. But what it does is pretty much if you change anything here, it also changes it in the controller. So it's doing that double data binding, it's doing that binding between the controller and the directive. So I can change in the controller the model, and it will change in the directive, and I can change it into the directive, and I would also change it in the controller. So it's doing that data binding. So that's what that equal sign means. You have a model in your controller, which is science for us, and we want to pass it to the directive, and if there are changes in the directive, most likely, then it would also change in this controller. If you guys have any questions, let me know. This is pretty much the differences between the and sign, equal sign, and @ sign in Angular 1. Thank you.